So I'm Larry Sharpe, and I'm here at FreedomFest again with another great conversation, talking about respect, talking about ethics and value. And I'm very lucky that I have with me today Micheal Strong of the Socratic Experience. Micheal, tell me a little bit about what you do.
Sure, I am in education. Interesting, we were talking about school choice. So for 35 years, well, long story, but I love to create schools based on respect and harmony.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does one create a school? That seems like a hard thing to do.
Well, it seems like a hard
than,
thing to do, but I've been doing it a long time.
Got it.
Really, you just get parents, you provide something the parents want. And so many kids are miserable in the system.
Yes.
And so
my
market, one of my marketing taglines has been a school for kids who hate school. And I actually tell parents and kids, I love learning and I hate school. And it's a great way to bond with the millions of unhappy kids out there.
No, I think you see it, right? Your point's so valid. You see it in my state, New York, too, but all over.
Yeah.
Huge dropout rates.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that all the kids are just, dumb or whatever excuse you want to make. Of course not.
No.
There's other issues there.
Secondary school was the most boring and cruel years of my life.
Yes.
As an adult, I'm never, ever bored. And if somebody's a jerk, I don't hang out with him. It's easy. Whereas in school, we cage them together. A few data points. 75% of high school students are unhappy. 2/3 are disengaged from learning.
Yeah.
These are the ones still in school. Before COVID, 37% seriously depressed, 19% suicidal. Adolescence in America is a catastrophe.
100%. And
government schooling is a big part of that.
Yes, fails tremendously. I agree.
Yep.
Total overhaul.
Yep.
100%. Wow, I'm so glad you came today. This may be a not as interesting conversation as I think. Who knows? We'll see. But let me ask you if I could. I think that most people have a left or right lean.
Right.
They would consider themselves either more conservative or more progressive, one or the other. Most would.
Right.
But what we're talking about is not kind of like your values, but more about your ethics, meaning at what point is it okay to use coercion?
Right.
At what point is it 100% not okay to use coercion?
Yeah.
And are there exceptions to when coercion is okay or only persuasion?
Yeah.
So I'm not here at all to say you should be more conservative or you should be more liberal.
Right.
Just where's that line?
Super good question. And I actually started on the left, and then when I learned economics, I realized that coercive government was harmful, actively harmful. So now I'm very much a voluntarist. And then there are tricky issues. If a community is practicing child abuse, should we, in general, don't initiate violence? But yeah, there are some edge cases where if somebody's doing really something horrible, we need to talk about it.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm a pretty radical voluntarist.
Oh, I like that. It's great.
Right out there.
So let me go with what I think most people would agree upon.
Right.
If not everybody.
Right.
Is that we want to be happy.
Absolutely.
So that happiness that we're all looking for.
Right.
If someone is going to use force against you,
Right.
hurt you, punish you in some way, clearly it's going to make you less happy, right?
Right. Totally.
If someone is going to either break or steal your things or your property, either through physically doing it or even through fraud,
Right.
I think that it's going to make people less happy.
Absolutely.
The question, though, is, obviously we believe that.
Right.
We're here,
Right.
So obviously we believe that. Do you think most people believe that, hey, for me to be happy, I should not have those things happen to me?
So it's interesting. I think that most people at that level would agree, but they believe that coercive government is necessary. So for me, yes, there's a really human fundamental appeal where you and I agree. I think most of the world agrees. And then most of my work then is explaining how, in fact, there will be more prosperity and harmony if we quit coercing.
Got it. So then, if I get you right, you're saying that an individual might say, for me, I want no coercion.
Right.
I want no theft.
Right.
But, for somebody else, maybe it's okay if we were to make them do a certain thing.
Yeah, I don't know if you know Mike Humer, but Mike Humer is a philosopher, and I love his work because basically he points out that all kinds of things that if you did it to me or I did it to you would be horrific, the government routinely does, and nobody cares.
Yes.
But once you think about it like that, all of a sudden it's shocking. I mean, take war, one of the most horrible things, and I like to be pro-U.S., and U.S. has killed millions of innocent people. It's 100%. Just, once one starts thinking about it, it's horrific.
So then I guess what we're saying here is when it comes to the individual, not necessarily to others, that every individual for themselves, or maybe those that they love also, would say that human respect, not committing fraud or theft or violence
Yep.
is going to make people happier, create more harmony, more prosperity.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
that's kind of a principle, right?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're agreement on that. I like
Absolutely.
that. So if I then go to the next step, though, is there a time when someone might believe that government force is actually helping? Right? I don't think that the average person, when they say, I'll give you an example.
Right.
Maybe the GOP, as an example, wants to
Right.
create laws that people can't do drugs.
Right.
I make
Right.
that up, right? They don't
Right.
want to do drugs. You should not
Right.
do drugs. And so we have to outlaw drugs, but not because we're mean people,
Right.
because we're helping.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You don't know any better. You can
Right.
do drugs and hurt
Right.
yourself.
Right.
So I have to step in and fix this. I mean,
Right.
is that an exception or no?
Well, I think the tricky cases are both children and we'll call it the mentally ill. And then the
Okay.
question is, are some drug addicts in the mentally ill category? I think in general, personal responsibility is ground zero of everything. And then there are also some cases where property rights are ambiguous, so I'd say clear property rights are important. But I think those are the hard cases where if somebody's mentally ill and doesn't know what they're doing, is there a point at which, say as a parent, certainly with children,
Sure.
there's a point at which you can stop your child from doing something. But I think we should put those boundaries as far out as possible because of the potential for abuse. And how far exactly can we put those out? And we'd have to think, this is why libertarians get into extreme
Yes.
cases of crazy scenarios,
Right.
because I think most of us would push things way out there.
But I think you have some people who would believe, for the better,
Right.
that there should be no drugs.
Right.
Like, it's not kids, it's
Right.
not mentally ill, it's
Right.
everybody. They're included,
Right.
but no one
Right.
gets to, because you don't know better. I'm going to
Right.
protect you
Right.
from yourself. And I
Right.
think a person who believes that, again, isn't being mean.
Right, no.
They think they're helping.
Right.
How is that going to hurt people?
So, this is where I want to persuade, and so the way I persuade is usually consequentialist. That is,
Okay.
that the harms of doing that vastly exceed. Because
What do you mean by the harms? I
So,
mean, I'm trying to
certainly
limit harm.
Right. Well, of course, if we make drugs illegal, next thing you know, we're police are breaking into people's homes and shooting and killing people.
Sure.
Horrible.
Sure.
I mean, this is why, should somebody maybe be doing a little bit less of drug X or Y? Maybe they should be doing a little bit, but all of a sudden now we're knocking into people's homes and shooting them.
Right.
For me, it's like, there's this ambiguous case of might we sometimes occasionally possibly sort of help somebody versus let's go in and shoot them.
Right.
Oh my God,
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So even in that case, you'd be like, you know what? Probably not.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
But then let me go the opposite side. You have people, maybe like the Democratic Party,
Right.
who tends, relatively now,
Right.
really, hey, get rid of the guns.
Right.
People are
Right.
being shot. This
Right.
is a bad thing. Get
Right.
rid of all the guns.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not doing it because they're mean.
Right.
They're doing it because they think, I'm saving you, right?
Right.
If you have a
Right.
gun in your house, you're going to kill
Right.
somebody. You're going to go to a school shooting, right?
Right.
So I'm going to help everybody.
Right.
Is that an exception?
So the way I handle most of those sorts of things is I'm a communitarian voluntarist, if you will.
Okay.
And so I could imagine, I'm actually a big fan of HOAs and private communities.
Sure, absolutely.
I can imagine wanting to live in a community with no guns, in which case, if I want to opt into such a community and sign something that says this is the rules for all of this community, I'm free to do so. And so with all of those sorts of things, if people don't want to see tattoos or people don't want whatever rules, I think we would live far more harmoniously if everybody who wanted to force other people opted into a community where Larry has to paint his house red. Okay, we're going to go to the HOA where everybody's house is red
Right.
and no guns. Okay, cool.
Got
As
it.
long as you opt in through consent.
So you're basically saying that the key aspect here is, I may or may not agree,
Right.
but I've got to respect the other person.
Absolutely.
I've got to say, you
Absolutely.
want that lifestyle,
Absolutely.
good for you.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
that's what I've got to
As
say.
long as you're not directly, violating myself or my property, I don't have a right to tell you what to do in any
Right.
sense whatsoever. And if we allow live and let live, in one sense, it's as simple as live and let live,
So in that case now, we're saying basically human respect
Right.
is a principle.
Absolutely.
If we look at our neighbors
Right.
with human respect first,
Right.
we're going to have more harmony, more
Yep,
happiness,
yep.
more prosperity.
Yep.
What about those who you mentioned earlier,
Right.
who maybe can't help themselves?
Yeah.
Right? Children, as you mentioned, people who are mentally ill.
Right.
Does it make sense at one point for us to step in? And I'll give you an example.
Right.
What if we found out that statistically, people over a certain age, whatever that age is, 75, whatever the age is, that there's a high percentage of them who get taken advantage of by younger family members.
Right.
I don't know if that's true. I'm making this up for the sake of argument.
Right.
If that's true.
Yeah.
What if we said, as a law, once you turn 75, you now lose your rights, and the state will take over because we care about our elderly.
I mean, that's kind of fun. I'm laughing because, of course, the abuse for that, the potential for abuse there is so extraordinary.
Absolutely. I mean, but obviously the intent would be very good.
Well, again, this is where I go to voluntarism. So I can imagine voluntary communities where you can sign, you go into this voluntary community, and maybe here you have some kind of insurance that protects you. And this is the other thing, is private solutions are so much more sophisticated.
Got it.
And so I can imagine I might, when I'm still, of good mind, sign an insurance contract that had all sorts of eventualities, but I would trust the private insurer that I voluntarily chose to take care of me way, way over the government.
Well, what about the logic, right? If I'm doing this, I'm going to say to you, you're being selfish. Michael, you're being selfish.
Yeah.
Just because you have the ability to do that, there are millions of Americans who don't.
Well,
so why won't you sacrifice for these millions of Americans who aren't like you?
Talk about respect. So one of the other things, different sort of thing, but I come from the working class. My mother was a high school dropout. When I got to graduate school and I saw the condescension that people in academia have for normal human being, frankly disgusts me. And so talk about respect. A lot of people think, oh no, school choice. Basically they think poor people can't pick good schools. And in the back there, those poor idiots will choose bad schools. And you claim to care about the poor and the oppressed. So for me, basic human respect, I respect people with Down syndrome.
Sure.
I do respect children. I respect children. So I would, push, children should have more rights than they do. I think that we can push respect way beyond. So when I think of children and mentally ill as exceptions, it would be, farther out than we currently allow, because I think everybody is more capable. And the other thing is, as you know, if you give people the power of responsibility and choice, then they rise to the occasion. I think people have been, oppressed by the state, become passive and dependent. Again, in education, I think school actively makes people less capable because it reduces their agency. If we increase people's agency, give them experience making decisions, making mistakes, then they will become more capable. So in a way, I would say the statist solution of the state must do everything is a horrible self-fulfilling prophecy in that it makes people weaker and less able, making them seem weak and less able. But if we really respect people...
stuck in a spot, though, here with what you just said, right? You have a lot of Americans now who've been through that school system.
Right.
Who now believe that two things. One, it is the government's job to take care of me. Right?
Yeah.
And two, a more important piece that you mentioned earlier, which is if we vote on it, it's not violence.
And that's...
Right? Because I know, look, I didn't go take your money. I just voted for the cops to come take your money. Right? I didn't do it. And that's not really violence because now you're a criminal. So therefore it's okay because we voted on it. And we are, a lot of people are voting. They think voting makes it okay. How do we then fix that issue? Right? Where I've got a bunch of people who think it's totally fine if we vote on it.
I think one of the most pernicious phrases when people teach government is that in a democracy, there's the consent of the governed. For me, consent is very direct. You join this HOA, I'm actually in favor of video consent. So ideally, we would explain the rules of this HOA. We would walk you through there, videotape. Larry, do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? Way better than the, when we consent to apps on the phone. We just click whatever.
We just click and move on.
I just gave away my rights way.
I just gave you my house.
Exactly. I want real explicit consent. And I think there, that covers a lot of this. And I think everyone's standard for consent ought to be very explicit, direct consent. Because otherwise, all the abuses we see happening will continue to happen.
I got it. It's great. So again, I think we fall back to coercion is generally going to make things worse. If government's going to do anything, it should be thinking first on human respect. Before it makes any step.
Absolutely.
I think we all agree that's a principle of human respect.
And we should make things as voluntary as possible.
Well, the other issue that I think we have is, to all the points you brought up, this sounds great between you and I, having a conversation, but the second I talk to someone who is more partisan, if I bring up gun control,
Yeah.
or if I bring up school choice, or whatever I bring up, they're going to take a side.
Right.
And they're going to assume I'm on the other side.
Right.
And they're going to call me a bad guy and not listen.
Right.
Right? If they're more Democratic, they're going to say, oh, you're a crazy conservative.
Right.
They're more Republican, oh, you're a crazy liberal.
Right.
They're going to tell me that, they're not going to hear.
Right.
I feel like, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, that the way to get around that is what you were talking about. Talking not about the philosophy of left or right, but of the individual and human respect.
Absolutely. And helping them say, again, I think our intuitions for most Americans, I think, really are live and let live. So I often say, let's let Alabama be Alabama and San Francisco be San Francisco,
Right.
And, and I might want to live in Austin,
Sure.
And I think my basic standard is we ought to live in communities that are within commuting distance of another community, but all voluntary and maybe very different rules, and maybe you want to go party over there and maybe you want to raise your kids over there and you want to work over there, totally cool.
I like that idea. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. I think human respect is the key, and I think you get that same thing.
Big time.
Thank you so much for the time you gave me.
Okay,
Thank you.
delighted to meet you. Thank
Good
you.
meeting you. Thanks.
Yeah.